We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate. Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. So it seems our politicians are having a bit of trouble with their figures. Jeremy Corbyn got himself into a right mess in an interview with Pledge alumna Emma Barnett. Nice work, Emma. And who can forget Diane Abbott and the police numbers fiasco with our very own Nick Ferrari. But it's not just Labour. The Tory manifesto pledge on free school breakfasts proved flakier, well, than a cornflake, not to mention that clarification on the dementia tax. So here's a tip to all of you from us here on The Pledge. Next time, do your sums. It's not that hard. On today's show, Carol says it's time for internment. Greg says he's delighted to see the back of Katie Hopkins. Nick thinks there is such a thing as too much sex. And June wants to be the official opposition. Can you feel it? Something is happening. The old politics and the old smear and fear tactics don't seem to be working anymore. Project Fear, trying to terrify the nation into voting Remain, didn't work. Nor did the dog whistle when it came to painting Sadiq Khan as a closet extremist in the mayoral election. Nor, it appears, a Tory High Command's highly personal attacks on Jeremy Corbyn, his alleged terrorist links, his unsuitability for high office, the PM calling him weak and unstable, whereas she, of course, is, all together now, strong and stable. But it's not working. Of course, the only poll that matters is June the 8th. But May's approval ratings over Corbyn have plummeted. She may even lose seats. Corbyn's acolytes aren't innocent of dirty dealing themselves, but he's not in government yet. It's time for the nasty party to change course before it's too late, steal Jezza's clothes and start offering hope, as well as fear.
Rachel, before I answer, can I just have a minute for your brilliant interview with Nigel Farage this week? Best thing on TV.
Hope and fear.
Hope and fear in one dinner debate. I have to say, I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. Theresa May has just played this all wrong. And as we saw with Zach's campaign, the Linton Crosby days, that school playbook, it's over. It doesn't work anymore. And how can you make Jeremy, and you know I'm not the biggest Corbyn fan, but how can you make Jeremy Corbyn now look somewhat electable? And that's all down to her.
Well, I'm glad that you agree with me, June. I mean, should we have a look at some of Theresa May's highlights when she's from the smorgasbord of vitriol that she's been feasting from?
Last night showed that Jeremy Corbyn's minders can put him in a smart blue suit for an interview with Jeremy Paxman. But with his position on Brexit, he will find himself alone and naked in the negotiating chamber of the European Union. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have the belief, the will or the plan to deliver Brexit. And he doesn't have the strength to do so either. The only way he can get into number 10 is by doing a deal with the Scottish Nationalists and the Liberal Democrats, who do not believe in Brexit and do not want it to succeed.
Nick, do you see in the Telegraph this morning, it's actually reported, they've been briefed, that she's dropping the politics of fear. She's realised it's not working because we're going to head for a coalition of chaos, aren't we?
Right.
Okay, oh, here we go.
You talked about stealing Jezza's clothes and you said that the Conservatives lose seats. I give you this pledge. If the Conservatives lose seats, I will wear your green jumpsuit. I tell you that now, the next Thursday after the election, if they lose seats.
The nation looks forward to it.
Well, the nation has suffered enough, but there we are.
Go on, hold on. Wait, why are you so sure? Well, we all know that.
That's the whole gag.
Why are you... Come on. Look, but her poll lead is down to 3 points, Nick.
Yes, the poll is, and we're going to discuss that a little bit later.
So how do you explain that, then, Nick?
Very easily. That is one in a range of polls.
True.
It is a company that member told us consistently that Britain would vote leave, and always said Britain would leave, and I think we all know, in fact... that Britain would remotely leave. I'm so sorry. It also is a poll organisation in the past has had some fairly wild predictions. But let's just come back to what you say. It has not been a classic campaign by the Conservatives. I agree with that. I don't think for a second that dog whistle politics, whatever you want to call it, is over. I think at times you have to be seen to play the man and not the ball for the simple reason of this. Imagine there was, God forbid, another outrage such as Manchester, and it was announced that Cobra, unfortunately the Prime Minister couldn't be there, Cobra would be chaired by Diane Abbott. That's all you need to say, because that, again, by personalising it, I know, but politics is the business of personalities, as you know, probably as better of any of us around this table, and that is what you have to do. If you're seeking to lead a country, you have to show that you have the wherewithal, the nous, the skills, the mental faculties to do it all, and I think that pointing out that in some instances there's very mixed messages from Mr Corbyn about certain aspects and certain allegations of some of the friends he's kept is totally and utterly valid.
Carol, Theresa May said this was going to be the Brexit election. She hasn't spoken about Brexit at all, and things haven't gone well for her.
It's been her biggest mistake not to make it about Brexit.
Go on.
She, you know, her advisor, Nick Timothy, he wanted to steer it away from that. Catastrophic mistake. And you could say the other night by that debate on television, well, the sort of debate with her and
Which
Corbyn.
one are we talking about?
The one on Monday with Corbyn go first and then she went. The one with Paxman. You could say on that she was floundering for much of the time, but then suddenly she started to talk about Brexit and the audience was whooping and cheering and hollering. But, you know, I don't think it's as much. I don't think it's as much about...
That's because she personalises the Brexit thing. But by saying Corbyn can't do it and I can.
But I think she's right on that. But anyway, but apart from that, don't remember a lot of the polls, young people are talked to for a lot of these polls, and young people don't care. It's not that they don't care about Ireland or the IRA. They weren't around for it, so it's not really in their heads. Older people remember.
But young people care about Brexit.
Well, yes, they do care about Brexit, but I'm not even sure it's the fact of her fear tax. I think it's the fact that Corbyn, in the past few weeks, has morphed into something I don't recognise. I think he'll still make a terrible Prime Minister, but he looks a bit like a leader. I hate to say it. I mean, but he can't.
Greg, she is going to turn it into the Brexit election now, isn't she? Because it's a policy
I think if you run it
on.
around strong and stable, actually what you mean is boring.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what she's come across as, boring, throughout the whole thing, without any sort of anything else. Yeah. There's nothing there. And I think what's interesting is I still presume the Tories will win, and I still presume she'll be the Prime Minister. But she'll have to be a very different Prime Minister because, you know, the Teflon Theresa May is gone. Yeah. And a lot of people in the Conservative Party and a lot of her own cabinet, who she doesn't consult about anything, including whether or not she should have an election, are now going to say, we're not putting up with this anymore. And so I think the strong and stable has gone anyway. She has now got to be a different sort of Prime Minister if she's going to remain as Prime Minister.
But, Greg, can I just approach Greg on one thing? You think she's going to be the Prime Minister? She's going to go and do the negotiations for us, which could take 2 years, 5 years. Do you think, on the evidence of this general election campaign, that she is actually the right person to conduct this negotiation?
No, I've never thought she's the right person, because I think she straight away had said, you know, Brexit means Brexit and all that, and suddenly went from somebody who was a Remainer, to becoming the leading hardline Brexiteer. I think we'd get a better deal if it's not her, if you want my honest opinion. I think if which I don't think will happen, but if Corbyn was the next Prime Minister, I think actually he would get a better deal, and I think he'd get a better deal because the rest of Europe would welcome him because he's not Theresa May.
But also, can I just say, I think the other thing with Corbyn is we mustn't forget he's brilliant in a debate. That's how he got the Labour leadership in the first place. And bringing up his past, we all kind of know his past anyway. And I am no Corbynista, as you know.
Tell me how he was brilliant with Faisal Islam and on the Sky.
No, I'm talking about the...
brilliant last night. He was terrible last night.
I don't think he was terrible last night.
No, but I think June's point is all the bad news about Corbyn is already baked in.
We know it.
And people are...
the
people who love Corbyn are too young to remember in
But you're talking about how he performs on a stage in front of a TV camera.
Don't forget the Labour leadership debate.
But that's not the same as negotiating round a table.
We agree.
Yeah, we know she's not very good. She's not very good on a TV camera, but I suspect she'll be much better in negotiating.
Yes. Yeah, but if you talk to the people in the cabinet with her when she was Home Secretary, if you talk to the Cleggs and the Camerons, she drove them all nuts. because she wouldn't negotiate anything. Now, you're not going to get a decent deal on Brexit by just sitting there and saying, that's all I'm prepared to give, I'm not going to give any more. She's not going to get it.
But how do you know she's going to say that?
Well, she's already saying that.
Well, I don't...
It doesn't mean that you say lots of things before a divorce. It doesn't mean you actually go in and present yourself like that when you are actually divorced.
That's kind of what you have to judge things by now.
Well, the question is, did she want to... I mean, she had a poll because she wanted to have a bigger majority. And the question I don't quite know is, did she want a bigger majority so it gave her an easier time giving stuff to the Europeans?
No.
I'm sure and if she didn't, if she was doing it the other way, to say, I'm going to be really tough, well, she's just damaged herself. And she's damaged the case.
But going back to my topic, which is the politics of fear, Jeremy Corbyn has never gone personal, and he's also never responded to these personal attacks.
No, but hang on,
so
he hasn't gone personal.
We've got one more week. I mean, how is she going to play this now?
But he hasn't gone personal. But he's had his lieutenants do it for him. He's had Diane Abbott out there. He's had Emily Thornberry.
But that's
they've got very personal.
He's stayed above it all.
What they have to do
I don't think that works anymore. Look at the Trump campaign when Hillary was only attacking Trump and not talking about what she was going to do. It didn't work. People want to hear what you're going to do.
What's interesting is those of us who were here that week the election announced, we all put what we thought the majority was going to be in. I'd love to see them now, because we were talking about things somewhere between 50 and 150. If she gets a 50 majority now, she'll see that as...
That's a failure.
That'll be seen as... Well, it'll be seen today as a success.
Yeah. She'll get more than that.
I think she'll get more than that.
Do you think she'll get more than that?
I think
What size? What's the biggest size they do that outfit in?
We'll have one...
Okay, maybe we'll put two together.
You can put, one in one in the other.
Could we have one specially made?
I don't know. Yeah, we better get on the phone. Yeah, we're going to have to give somebody a call. With just days to go until the general election, we, the great British people, need to face up to the reality of the condition of our current politics. Let's call it post-politics. Our opposition parties have proved that they're unable to properly hold this government to account. And things could get even worse next week after the vote. Theresa May is hoping for an increased majority that could give her an all-access pass to Brexit and effectively wipe out the opposition. So where the parties have failed to step up, the people need to step in. We've seen that Mrs May responds to public pressure. Just look at her U-turns over national insurance and social care. So if we, the people, get actively involved in politics, we can be the alternative opposition and create real change. We have always seen politics as an option that we're offered, something that we can delegate to a group of mainly middle-aged, middle-class men. No offence, Nick and Greg. Well, unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and our hard-won democracy is going the way of a one-party state. So we now have to start a US-style movement to really take back control.
I'm not sure I quite get what you're saying. Are you basically saying, regardless of who gets elected, and who has the democratic will of the people, you believe that actually we should take to the streets and object?
No. What I'm saying is based on our last debate, that might not happen. But if we were looking at how the polls were 2 weeks ago, let's say, and if Theresa May was going to get a majority of 100, then we definitely have to be much more involved, because that would be giving her a blank check to do whatever she wants.
What do you mean by being more involved? I mean, I remember
think
something between 1 million and 2 million people...
You mean marching and...
But hang on a minute, somewhere between 1 million and 2 million people took to the streets of London to protest against the Iraq war.
Yeah, but then look at what that did to Tony Blair's legacy as a result. He never recovered.
He didn't recover.
He never recovered.
But an awful lot of those people are still...
But, hello, he never recovered from that.
But a lot of those people are disillusioned with politics because they took to the streets and nothing changed.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're living in different times now. If you look at America... What were you going to say, Nick?
Well, you're arguing against yourself. Were you here for the first debate, or was it someone who looks like June Sarpong? Because the June Sarpong who was here for the first conversation told us that, in fact, Jeremy Corbyn won the debates and the Labour Party were going to do fantastic. And now the June Sarpong who's just come in is suddenly saying...
We've got one party state.
I know, we've got one party.
What I'm saying, Nick,
no need to shout. Let's not increase the power of your argument, just increasing the level of your voice.
What I'm saying is, if she ended up with a ridiculously huge majority, then we have to get much more active.
You know what I love?
And by that I mean with what's happening in America at the moment.
I love the fact you go on these marches. I love your political passion. And I love the fact you feel like you have a moral obligation to do something.
Precisely.
But they don't work.
Says who?
Well, I'm going to just let me finish the point. No Prime Minister who believes they're doing something for the best of this country. They think they're doing it in the best interest of the country. They're not going to be swayed by a couple of thousand people outside the door.
I think this Prime Minister will.
I think in the short term, these things don't work. You know, all those protests against Trump around the world, against him, for Hillary, he's still where he is and she's still nowhere.
Well,
and it's not...
No, but if you look at what happened with Trump Care the first go-round, that was because of the resistance. You cannot deny that. And they had to go back to the table.
Marches and these kind of things, they don't work in the short term. They do work in the long term. Look at the suffragette movement.
Poll tax riots.
Well,
there you go.
And the one thing I'll give you is Trump was supposed to be coming here in June, and there was a lot of resistance to that. But I think generally they don't work.
No, but the thing politicians care most about is keeping their seats. And if they see that their constituents are not happy about something, they act.
I think we just have to show...
Out of self-interest alone.
Juno, we do have to say that clearly Jeremy Corbyn has got something, because you've talked about this possibility of a one-party state. Let's look at the poll today from YouGov. Among a range of polls showing the Conservatives down to just a 3-point lead. There are the figures for you. Conservatives with 42, Labour with 39. Just to remind you, at the start of the campaign, YouGov had the Tories leading by 24 points. I need to say many other polls show a wider Conservative lead. This is just the narrowest of the major polls that we've chosen.
That is my point, and that's my point. If we end up with a situation like that, then people have to get involved. And that... Sorry, go on, Greg.
But isn't this... I mean, Nick's right. This is the debate before the last one, really. I mean, what's now happening...
Yeah, it's not my fault you were put in a different order.
Oh, here we go. It's a producer.
Yes, it's not your... But no, I mean, surely the interesting debate now is we could well end up with a hung parliament. If those figures are right, we do end up with a hung parliament. Now, I still don't believe it's going to happen.
No, she will win.
And I still think she'll win. But, you know, who could have possibly seen a swing of this size?
In such a...
No, it's more than one poll.
But
no, all the polls are showing a swing back to the Labour Party.
Not like that. Some commentator said today, you know, in terms of predicting elections, you might as well toss a coin if it's YouGov that's telling you what the result's going to be. No one believes it.
Carol, don't you think that if she does end up with a sizable majority, then who's going to hold her to account?
So what have I got to do? Have I got to march with a placard?
You have to... Well, I've actually got a 10-point plan for you.
Oh, that's great. Can I pick a number?
Yeah, pick a number.
I'll go 3.
3, OK. Well, 3 is going to your constituency meetings at least once a month.
Oh. And what's that going to change? What do you think that's going to change and how quickly?
That's telling you to have
so they
have your say.
They write it down on a piece of paper.
Number 1 is what Michael Moore suggests in the US, which is a daily call to your MP or an email.
They're going to love you for that.
Works. Do you want number 4?
I'd love number 10. All these lists always slow down. It's like 10 things you need to know. Give me number 10.
Let me give you 4, then I'll give you 10. OK, so 4 is your own rapid response team.
What the hell? Have you been drinking? Have you been out with Tiger Woods again?
Can I just give you 10 first, Rachel?
That's it.
10 is a bit of comedy. There you go. See, let's do some right to it.
It always falls apart.
I think it's adorable, but we do live in a parliamentary democracy, don't we?
Yes,
and I think the other thing...
But we've never had a situation like this.
This is an increasingly big if.
Labour's win in 1979, 179-seat majority.
Yeah, but
that was your side, wasn't it? So that was all right. That's the difference.
I like 97 as well.
No, it was my turn.
Sorry, Rachel.
June. If she does get this overwhelming majority, it's a one-party state. The only person who's got her hands on the levers of power is Theresa May. Then I think in a way you're right.
I know.
But
and you're doing it with what you're doing with the Lib Dems is exactly what I'm talking about. People
everybody's got to make their own personal process. But I think we've got to recognise that the only way anyone can do anything is if the people actually have any power. At the moment, it doesn't look as if Theresa May is going to let Parliament have any power at all. So the people have got to kind of come in the middle.
So it's got to be us.
But however, I think that what's going to happen is this. Theresa May is probably going to win, going to push through Brexit. Not until we see that the real austerity hitting the NHS, for example, or the economy tanking, will we see people power actually happening on the street.
And people getting
involved. Give it 2 years, June, and I think you may be onto something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what,
I'm glad you've already started the charge.
If Corbyn gets in, I might actually take to the streets. OK. It's been 10 days since 22 people died in Manchester. 10 days in which the debris of lost and broken lives has been swept away on a tide of love, anger, shock and disbelief. But what remains is the fear. The fear of parents who want to hang on tight to their kids and never let go. The fear that one day soon they know they must, because life, as we keep being told, has to go on. The fear that another Salman Abedi is lurking in some deep, dark corner, just waiting to unleash fresh hell. Because that's the greatest fear, that what happened in Manchester will happen again, that more of our children will die. And the question on the lips of every mum and dad, every husband and wife, every lover, every gran and granddad is, what in God's name can we do to stop it? Well, one man, an ex-police chief, who was in charge at the time of the 7/7 bombings, thinks he has the answer. For the short term, at least, he wants the 3,000 suspected terrorists, we're told, are stalking Britain's streets, to be rounded up and detained in specialist centres. And already I hear the Liberals cry, but what about their civil rights? What about their human rights? Well, maybe we should ask the people of Manchester what they think about the human rights of those extremists who seek to destroy us. I don't know for sure, but I suspect they might say the human rights of Manchester's dead children are a damn sight more important than those of any would-be Islamist terrorist.
I have enormous respect for Assistant Commissioner Tariq Ghafoor, who is the senior police officer to whom you refer. I've interviewed him on a number of occasions. He's a good bloke, no question. However, I have to refer you to the words of a number of people who've been his bosses down the years. Formerly Ian, now Lord Blair, who disagrees with him. Formerly John, now Lord Stevens, who disagrees with him. And Sir Hugh Ward, who was a fairly senior. He ran PSNI, Police Service Northern Ireland, and ran ACPO. So we've got quite a number of top cops. The reason being, and I put this to you, if you accept, as all of those three do and many others, not only did it not work in Northern Ireland, it was actually a major recruiting tool for Northern Ireland and for IRA terrorists, I should say, IRA terrorists. What makes you think it would work now? And also, this is the worst time to make rash decisions like that.
Okay.
We're still, poor families are still burying the dead. I would argue, don't make decisions about something like that right now.
One of the reasons I think internment in Northern Ireland didn't work was because it targeted the Catholics and the nationalists, and it left the loyalist paramilitaries virtually untouched. So that one-sidedness caused huge resentment. What I think what Tariq Ghafoor is talking about here isn't internment camps like that. He's talking about detention centres. Now, we're always being told, and Ian Blair said, you know, he was one of the people who said we have to involve the Muslim communities. And one of the things about these centres is that they're going to be run by what do you call them? Special services, counter-terrorism bosses,
Counter-terrorism group, right.
Imams, members of the community
Carol,
that have been
detention centre is a detention centre.
Yes,
if it looks like a duck in practice,
and when
duck.
they're in there, the whole point is they're going to be put into a de-radicalisation programme. Now, hang on. Well, what do you mean, oh, come on? Isn't that the whole... What do you do with the terrorist who's radicalised? You have to de-radicalise them. And let me say, 2/3 of the terrorists who've been released from prison, having served their sentences, refuse to take de-radicalisation courses. At least this is trying to get to these kids to de-radicalise. And I think isn't this better than having them wandering the streets? We're told we have 23,000 potential killers on our streets. And the security services we talked about last week they don't have the manpower to deal with it. Isn't it better to get them together? And you know, I mentioned there about the human rights. I don't think the people of Manchester or anywhere care about the rights of a would-be terrorist. I think they care about their own human rights and their right to live.
Carol, have you got an example of where this actually works? Because if you look at Guantanamo Bay, that's been a disaster.
Well,
if you look at what the Americans did with the Japanese during the Second World War, that was a disaster.
Totally different.
Give me an example. But if you can give me an example of where internment camps are actually working...
This is not an internment camp.
What is this,
You've mentioned the Japanese camp.
If there isn't enough evidence to charge somebody, then how can you be detaining them?
OK, we've got a graphic here that Tariq Ghafoor has this is what he says. The time has come to set up special centres to detain those 3,000 extremists. There will be community-based centres where they would be risk-assessed and theologically examined. I would like imams to issue a collective fatwa condemning terrorist atrocities and giving religious backing to the new centres for the good of society. With their support, the centres would not be seen as a tool of the state. Now, that, to me, sounds nothing like the Japanese internment camps in America. It sounds nothing like the IRA internment camps. You know, we know about the camps in Ireland where there were torture centres in Ireland. That's not what this is about. This is about de-radicalising kids who may commit an atrocity.
But Nicky's right. what we shouldn't do is knee-jerk reactions. There clearly needs to be a thought-through policy, and that has to be rethought now, because we've got to... And I hope that's what the security service, that's what the police, and that's what the politicians are doing. No, just for a moment. That's what they're doing, I hope. And I hope they're thinking out what policies do we actually need in these circumstances. And it might mean massive increase in the number of people working for the security services. It might mean tagging. Okay. It might mean all sorts of things. But what you want is you want a group of people looking at it, thinking about it, and coming to a policy. And it might be that there's nothing more they can do, but let's see what they can do. But the idea of just jumping knee-jerk into internment...
How is it knee-jerk?
Well, because it's coming from you at this moment in time.
Yeah, very nice.
Right. No, it's the week after. That's knee-jerk.
We've been planning since 7/7 about what to do about terror.
I remember...
There are now 3,000 on the streets. What are we going to do? You know, if we don't change the way we handle terror, it's like
but
the people in Manchester don't matter.
I'm not suggesting we don't change it. What I'm suggesting is we have to think about it. We have to do it carefully.
I have some sympathy, because we know how many there are out there. We know how much time and energy and expense it takes, and that obviously, you know, the columnists' cry goes out: something must be done.
Yes.
But what? These are British-born citizens who have not, as yet, done enough to be banged up in an internment camp. That's the problem.
Do we wait until they do, like Salman Brady?
But under what law can you put these people under a lock and key, Carol? That's the problem.
Yeah. You supported me last week when we talked about tagging. This is a quantum leap. Why would you not be satisfied with a rigorous tagging regime?
Because I've read...
And just one other point. Do you not realise that it would cause an absolute split between the Muslim community? It would be an horrific...
Not if they were involved, and that's the point. That's what Tara Gafoor is saying.
Do you think that...
Involve them. Involve the imams.
Why would they want to be involved in something like that?
Because they get affected by terrorism every bit as much as we do.
They could be blown up.
I agree, but my point is, locking people up who haven't committed any crimes is insane.
But who
there are other programs.
It's illegal. It's not insane.
It's illegal.
You'd be locking people up who had the record of Salman Abedi, who had been watched by MI5.
But there are programs in other parts of Europe that are looking at how you de-radicalise young Muslim youth, and it's
not working.
Well, in places like Denmark it is.
Well, in this country, de-radicalisation in prisons is not working.
And it doesn't involve locking people up who haven't done anything
in this country,
yet.
It's not
Can
working.
I just quote? There's a quote from Paul Nuttall. I can't believe that you're agreeing with the leader of UKIP, Carol.
You'd have to bring up a UKIP person.
Yes, I do. And he says, I think we've got to look at ways of ensuring that our people are safe, whether that is a return to control orders, whether that is tagging these people. Who knows, in the future, maybe a return to internment. I'm not saying that now is the time to return to this, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Can I just read you a quote from Nick Clegg, who, remember, he diluted the orders that we were talking about in 2011. Yeah, and he stopped, the detention time was 28 days, he cut it down to 14. Let me tell you what he said when he did after that. He said, this cut in detention times is a move to rebalance terrorism laws in favour of civil liberties. Yeah. How sick and wrong does that sound now? And the people of Manchester listening to that will be sickened by hearing that.
But the people of Manchester also,
we've done
if you look at the spirit that's emerged in the last couple of weeks, I don't know they'd sign up to internment camps, because there's a lot of Muslims in Manchester, and I don't think they want to see them in a camp. I know you won't allow camps, sorry, centre, I apologise.
I think the narrative emerging from Manchester is that they want life to be much harder for terrorists.
But you will just politicise. If you did it, you've got to accept you just politicise another generation.
Yeah.
I mean, you really do. Yeah. And that's why I think I would like...
What's your answer?
Unlike you, I don't have an answer to everything, you see.
Was it being rude
you
to
have an answer. No, it does. You say you have an answer. I said this is
what yours is.
My answer is to ask people in the security services, in the police and in government to actually do an analysis, do what works, see what works in certain places and see what we can do.
Yeah. And would this, and Carol, can I ask a question? Would this be indefinite? Would there be a term limit on this? How long would you keep people locked up?
I'm not running it.
But but you agree with it. But surely you would have an idea of how long you think people should be there.
No, of course I don't have an idea for how long. I think this is a way to de-radicalise people who are currently plotting to cause harm. If Salman Abedi had been in one of these centres, 22 people from Manchester would still be allowed today.
Well, it's me next, and I want to say a few polite words about Katie Hopkins. Well done, LBC, for getting rid of Katie Hopkins, who tweeted that there was a need for a final solution for terrorists following the Manchester bombing. Given that the term final solution is so totally associated with Hitler, the Holocaust, and the murder of 6 million Jews, her tweet got a lot of publicity all around the world, and Ms Hopkins, quite rightly, took a lot of flack. She later claimed that the comment was a mistake and that she'd hit the wrong button on her laptop and used the word final when she meant to use the word true. Who believes that? Ms Hopkins once described refugees coming to Europe in open boats as cockroaches, and since she parted company with LBC, she has tweeted, "I see myself as the Jesus of the outspoken." No doubt she's looking for a second coming, even though she still writes a column for the Mail online. Of course, her departure comes just a few weeks after Kelvin Mackenzie was dropped by The Sun when he wrote an incredibly rude column about Liverpool and made comments about the Everton footballer Ross Barkley that provoked allegations of racism. Personally, I think broadcasters and newspaper editors need to take more care when deciding who they let host programmes and who they let write columns. Of course, in a democracy, we want to read and hear a range of opinion, but there must be limits. And in broadcasting, there should also be proper balance.
It's a difficult one. I mean, the two people you mentioned have been huge names in this country and have got, in Katie's case, 750,000 followers on Twitter, whereas I've got 30,000. And there's a reason for that, is that they find a huge audience for this kind of very outspoken, very provocative fare. And, you know, what they do is very clever. And I'm not saying it's right, but it's very clever and people listen. And what we're seeing is really kind of the arrival of the shock jocks. And they are a couple of shock jocks. And what they do very cleverly and very successfully is all of us have got a sort of angel and a devil. And when something happens, I think what they do is they work out what is the most offensive, provocative thing I can say in this situation, which somehow appeals to the devil on your shoulder, to the lizard part of your brain. If you were thinking the very, very worst thing in the world at that moment, they're the ones who say it. I don't agree with it, but they do it well. And I think it's probably right that LBC, as a broadcaster, has had to let her go. A publisher actually has more latitude, and as for the moment, Mail Online are holding on to Katie because people read her.
I think you're wrong about LBC. I think they caved into a bullying, baying mob who think they have the right to police people's thoughts. Look, everyone around this table, I'm sure, was horrified by that comment. You have every right to hate what Katie Hopkins says. You have every right to be offended by what she said. But what you don't have the right to do is to take that offence and mobilise it to wreck her life, to wreck her career. You don't have the right to do that because that is very ugly. The people who...
We don't know, by the way, how she left LBC.
Okay,
it could have been by mutual consent.
But what I noticed, the people who were calling for her to be fired on Twitter, these are people who present themselves as liberals. And what they were doing was the total opposite of liberalism. It was very ugly what they were doing, because what they want is what happens in dictatorship, and you just said, no, let me finish. You just said, we've got to be careful who we give TV shows and columns to. Why do we...
No,
you're policing
No, I'm sorry, but there is a distinction between, as you say, publishers and broadcasters. Broadcasters in this country have laws. Those laws require balance. That's the law. It says... Papers don't. I agree with you. Papers are comment free. The law says quite clearly that broadcasters have proper balance. Now, I've grown increasingly concerned that some of the balance actually isn't there, and that balance isn't letting Katie Hopkins run a programme then and someone else balancing it 3 days later. That's not balance.
Can I just ask you a question?
Let's
okay. See, I actually I disagree with you on this one, Greg. I'm not a Katie Hopkins fan. But I don't think she should have been fired. I think in the case of...
Well, we don't know she was fired.
Or whatever. Or she shouldn't have lost her show, let's say. In the case of LBC, there is balance, because straight after Katie Hopkins, they've got Majid Nawaz, whose views are completely opposite to hers. And I think the problem we have, particularly with those that are sort of a bit more liberal, and I suppose we could call ourselves a bit PC, is we try to shut down this type of thinking, and it's there, and as a result, people get resentful. And my point with Katie is, I do think that there, unfortunately, are a lot of people who do think the way she does, and what we need to do is make sure that those of us that don't agree with her are actually having a strong counter-narrative to people like that. We can't shut it down, because when you shut it down, that's when people get resentful.
Nick, sorry, we have to bring in other people sometimes. Nick, the Kelvin Mackenzie case is a bit different, isn't it? Because Kelvin, I don't, for the life of me, know what made him write that piece about Liverpool. I mean, he's got a whole history with Liverpool, and I also don't understand why the editor let it go in the paper. But, I mean, if you actually... what he said about Liverpool is, talking about Ross Barkley, the footballer, he is an attractive catch in the Liverpool area, where the only men with similar pay packets are drug dealers, and therefore not at nightclubs, as they are often guests of Her Majesty. And he was pretty unpleasant about Liverpool. And given his whole history with Hillsborough, wasn't it a really unwise thing for him to do?
I think it's a fair point that someone else must have seen it. It couldn't have just stormed straight into the papers. I'm a columnist, as many of us have been around here. You don't just press a button, it suddenly appears on page 17. If someone normally has a look at it. I'll tell you what Kelvin Mackenzie said in just a second. Just to run something past you... I mean, Greg, you did actually say that broadcasters and editors need to be careful about the people that they choose. I don't know that it was on your watch, but there's a fair chance when you were running the BBC, you probably employed Jonathan Ross. And he, of course, got tied up with that hideous episode with Russell Brand. I don't blame you for that. You hire these people.
That was
and
a
these people...
Nick. Come on, Kelvin and
hold on. Let me just finish. Indeed, I'll come to Kelvin in just a second. So I think sometimes you give people and then they have the licence. As for Kelvin, of course, the other aspect was that he made unfortunate reference to Ross Barkley's physical demeanour, and I can't remember whether it was a gorilla or an ape or whatever it might turn out to be. And then we subsequently learned that Ross Barkley's one of his grandfathers was of Nigerian. Yeah. So then it became a racist storm. So we just need to say this for Kelvin Mackenzie, because that also played into it. And I'm quite happy to declare myself that I've worked for Kelvin. I'm a huge fan and admirer of Kelvin, and I've learnt a lot from him. This is what he said: "I had no idea of Ross Barkley's family background, and nor did anybody else. For the mayor of Liverpool and a handful of others to describe the article as racist is beyond parody." And I leave you with this idea, which is, for all the columnists around here, I write stuff, admittedly probably not as pungent, as pithy or personal as Kelvin does, but I honestly don't think I can be expected to research the lineage of every person I ever write about to find out whether they have a Muslim or someone of a different race or a different colour or whatever it might be.
Nick, I understand that, and I agree with that. But don't you feel that over the years, people who are writing columns in newspapers are becoming more and more unpleasant?
Can I ask my question, because it relates to this? Since I've started doing the pledge, you have made many comments about me and my style of writing, and I've made comments here which you have made clear to me that you're offended by. So should I be sacked from the pledge?
That's a bloody... Where do I sign up for that?
No,
that is a great idea.
I'm quite happy for you to make the comments you make. I don't agree with many of them.
I know.
And I also think... But my concern is, which is what I just said to Nick, my concern is that columnists, in a world where... to get viewers, to get readers, you go more and more and more extreme and more and more personal.
And actually, you write it because you feel it.
I was quite relieved. I like Katie Hopkins, by the way. As a person, it's Jekyll and Hyde. She's a very nice woman.
Precisely.
And she's had health problems as well. But I felt, in a way, relief, because they're massive competition, because they are so strident, vociferous and so outspoken, Greg. This is the market for it.
You don't say it to upset people, to make controversy. You say it because you believe it.
Well, I think with Katie she does, because like Rachel said, she's actually a nice person one-on-one.
Let me read out
Not sure about Kelvin.
Let me read a quote out from Jack Monroe. She said... She's talking about David Cameron. She tweeted this: "Because he uses stories about his dead son as misty eyes rhetoric to legitimise selling our NHS to his friends." Now, what do you think about that? She's left wing. She said that.
To be fair to her,
she kept her column in The Guardian.
To be faid to her, what she said she'd written a personal apology to the Camerons and said, "I'm deeply sorry about that tweet. I'm ashamed of myself."
But it still went out to a lot of people before she apologised.
Yeah, sure, and I don't think think it's a thing only of the right. I think it's for the left as well. I think the whole tone of the debate has become more unpleasant. And I think the arrival of shock jocks, really, which is from America, to here. I'm surprised, personally, that Ofcom haven't got more involved in looking for proper balance and the tone of some of the discussion that now goes on.
But you can't imagine columnists write what they write every week just to be controversial.
Oh,
The reason, you're wrong.
But Carol,
columnists write what they think and what they believe and what their opinions are. Rachel, don't they? You don't write it to be controversial.
Well, Carol, we've also got to say we've all written columns, and sometimes it's not because you've got a burning. I am for you for the moment. So we've also got to let people know that actually you do have to fill a space every week as well, Carol. It's not that you've got this burning desire to get something off your chest every single week. It's a job, and she was doing her job, and she needed to keep her numbers up.
And in Katie's case, this was her own personal Twitter. She did not say this on LBC.
No, but it was the wrong thing to say.
Oh, we agree with that. Of course it's the wrong thing to say.
But she should still have the right to say it. We do not have the right to police people's thoughts.
Hang on. She still has the right to say it on on Twitter. What she hasn't got the right to say it is on a broadcast.
Well, I have the right to silence you all, you four commentators. Because we've already mentioned Emma Barnett's interviewing technique, but after the break, I'll be talking about something she definitely didn't learn from me. Time for one that can instantly be filed under the heading totally bleeding obvious. It is that the more you tell and teach youngsters about sex, the more they're going to want to do it. An academic study came out earlier this week that rips apart the pernicious, damaging and wholly misjudged sex education industry in this country. The report looked at the impact of budget cuts for local authorities following the 2008 financial Armageddon, where many stopped lavishing millions on sex prevention measures, such as handing out condoms and morning after pills like they were sweeties, and hiring teenage pregnancy coordinators. Now, by the way, what on earth does that job actually entail? It sounds like a teenage version of Blind Date, complete with a baby at the end. Here's the key. Where they cut the hardest, the rate of pregnancies dropped the most. In some instances, down to levels unseen since 1969. The moral is unambiguous. Sex, note, not relationship, education may be well-meaning, but it also happens to be about as useful as a ripped condom.
I think I want to say I love you after that. But, you know, you're right. You know, we shouldn't all be working... This policy of the teenage pregnancy coordinators, it's all working on the assumption that kids are going to do it anyway. So let's facilitate it. Let's make... And lots of authorities now have free condoms in all the chemists. They have free morning after pills everywhere you go. They have... What you're talking about, they have sex clinics actually in schools. It's crazy. So you're facilitating it. You're making it easy. And I just think, you know... I don't know whether you know this as well. Parents can currently withdraw their kids from sex education lessons if they want to. The government is shortly to change that. So you will have, as a parent, no say over what your child learns about sex or how they learn about it. The state is going to decide. And I think that is shocking. And it's what you say. This is just another example of well-meaning progressives telling us what to do with our kids and getting it totally wrong.
I fear we might be outnumbered.
Yes, I think
it's 3-2. Rachel Johnson.
Honest answer. Did you sit down with your lads and tell them about the birds and the bees?
No,
honest answer.
Not in explicit detail.
Who did you tell them about whether they could get their girlfriends pregnant and where they would get condoms and all the rest? Who did you leave it to?
The school.
Exactly.
Or their mum.
Oh, right.
No, what's
their
your
mum.
problem?
Right.
Well,
Greg,
hang on.
Greg, did you sit down with your boys or your eldest children and do the birds and the bees as well? Or did you did you outsource it as well?
Bits. But not... no, I agree with you totally. I mean, I agree with you.
Just bonkers.
I don't agree with these guys.
You want it both ways. Yes. You don't want to do sex education, but you don't want the state to do it either.
Look, what is interesting about, again, this piece of research is that the people who did it didn't draw the conclusions you drew. They said, isn't this interesting? We ought to know more about this.
Yeah.
And I think that is right. I think, I mean, it could be that...
They said correlative...
You always want to know more about... Why don't we just say, we don't spend as much, the kids don't get pregnant.
Because... Well, you can't say...
They didn't say it was cause and effect, Nick.
Yeah.
They didn't say because we're not teaching.
It's only you that says that because it happens to fit with what you believe.
Cause.
Well, how else do you want to interpret the figures then?
No, wait.
Sorry.
But how do we know that that's the reason? Like, we haven't looked at all the other factors. There could be something else. I don't know. I don't know that community well enough. But there could be something else going on there why there's been a drop in teenage pregnancies. We cannot say for certain it's that, especially when all of the data for the past 30 years has told us the opposite.
So how else
and
have
if
we
you look at the
reversed some...
Scandinavian countries...
Oh, please. We don't live in the bloody... whenever we do this, look at Denmark. Look, I don't live in bloody Denmark, and I don't live in Helsinki, so off about all of that.
We must look at those
We've managed to take in areas... we all agree we don't...
How do we not know that it could be because of a drop in youth unemployment? We don't know. We haven't looked at all of the factors.
Nobody wants unwanted pregnancies. Can we all agree with that? That is a point on which we all concur.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And can we all agree that for the past 30 years, that sex education, all of the data suggests that actually when you inform children properly...
No,
yes, we can.
I think we've got to move away from the data, because I do think the data is confusing.
Would you accept that some children, 10, 11, 12, are having sex now because, one, they know how to do it, two, it's very easy. And you can't imagine that having sex at 11 or 12 is good physically or mentally for children. The one class I do agree with in schools is sex and relationships.
No, but 10...
How one goes with the other.
But 10 and 11 and 12 is a bit extreme.
Kids are having sex at 10
But
and
I
11.
don't think there's as many as you're saying.
And also this puts pressure on kids.
We're looking at
kids are being
teenagers.
told how to have sex. There's a pressure on them. So if they think some people in their class are having sex
also get
and they're
pregnant
not...
at 11 because puberty is happening earlier. So I'm afraid you've got to have sex education
maybe
as well as
pregnant.
relationships that young.
Because they're being told how to do it.
Greg.
Well, just to get back to the real information, the facts and figures. Of course, there is another paper that was in the Lancet last year from Kate Wellings that had exactly the opposite. Said exactly the opposite. So what we're doing, and I agree with you, I could do the same thing, is we all pick one piece that suits our argument and use that. What I'd like to see is, and I presume this happens inside the civil service, and therefore they look at all these figures and they still say, and have convinced the Conservative government, that actually this is necessary.
Do you agree with the state deciding what your kids learn about sex?
I agree with sex education. I agree with sex education. I certainly agree with sex and relationship education in schools. I would also agree with. I think they should be taught much more about children and families and bringing them up and all sorts of other things in schools. Yes, I do.
Geography doesn't change your life. The way you learn about sex can have a massive impact on your life.
Well, how did you learn about sex?
Because my parents told me.
Yeah,
and we were working class on a counter, and yes, they told me they knew how to tell me about it, which is, I think, it's a parent's job, frankly.
But I think a lot of parents don't feel comfortable talking about sex with their
children.
But
neither do teachers.
And actually, making sure that children are informed and understand all the risks is important. It's a vital form of education.
Know how to do that? There was a report from Ofsted a couple of years ago that said a quarter of the schools that were giving sex education were not doing it properly because teachers felt uncomfortable.
I think it's easier when you're not emotionally involved with a child.
If I was to take you or speak to you about the delights of jumping behind the steering wheel of a Ferrari sports car and driving up the motorway at 120 miles an hour and how fantastic, you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to do it. You're going to want to do it. So you sit there and then the pressure, and the boy and girl are watching that, and the boy has been trying to make the girl, let's put it politely, put out, and the girl has said no and no and no. And suddenly there is a normalisation. Oh, come on, we learnt it all in class with 13 or 14.
OK, so Nick, what do you think?
You've been to one. How many of you attended?
Well, I mean, I have been to one.
Precisely. None of us have been there for years.
No, but often in schools they show a childbirth video. Isn't that the one thing guaranteed to stop people having sex for good? You know, young kids. I promise you.
And now they bring babies into the classes as well.
Well, they don't need to. They can bring their own babies into the classes. That's the whole problem.
But surely this depends on the sort of schools as well, doesn't it? I mean, what did you go to? Boys' schools?
Yes, I did private boys' schools.
Yeah. Well, I think sex education in all boys' schools.
It was hideous. It was ridiculous.
Yes, I didn't go to boys' school. I went to a co-ed school, and it was you had a different attitude towards women and discussion about than you would have had in a boys' school. I wouldn't send any kids to single-sex schools personally.
It was a religious affairs teacher who got the blackboard and he drew something that looked like a wizard's sleeve. We all fell about laughing.
Oh, stop!
And that was the end of it. We never had another lesson.
But Nick,
that's probably been half my trouble, actually.
Nick, don't you agree that in the end, teenagers are always going to have sex, and we need to teach them how to do it responsibly.
All I am doing...
what are you suggesting we do instead?
Do you think it's good at 5 the kids are taught about sex?
No.
But they are being taught.
But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about teenagers.
We're talking about sex education for children. So children aged 5 are being taught sex education.
But in terms of proper sex education, we're looking at teenagers, Carol.
Kids at 5 get sex education lessons, June. You're just splitting hairs here.
Well,
it goes from 5 through to 16.
Sex education is where it's happening.
Well, let's stick with the subject of sex, Rachel. For it's time for Straight Talker of the Week. Brexit divided the nation, strained communities and caused family feuds. It even caused some couples to split up. But this week, one person has been seeking to heal those wounds, reaching out as only she can.
Anyway, it's nice to see you. Should we talk about something else now? Could you go to bed with a Remainer? Could you make her see the light?
Do you know what? I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer that.
Astonishing. None of us have ever seen Nigel Farage speechless. And for that, Rachel Hardcore Flirty Johnson, you are this week's winner. Round of applause. June.
Did he answer off camera?
No, he didn't. I think I went on to say you need a nice Brexity girlfriend, Nigel. I don't think he disagreed with that.
That could have been interpreted in a different way, couldn't it, that question?
Yeah.
I think the son, who's been spending a lot of time calling me the turncoat sister, said, Rachel asks Nigel Farage to go to bed with her. Boom, boom.
Well, it's time for us to go to bed. That's it for this week. So, Arsene Wenger is staying on. Will Theresa